Ladies and gentlemen, veterans, Gold Star families, and fellow Americans, today we gather not simply for a holiday, but for a sacred act of remembrance. Memorial Day is not about the beginning of summer. It's about the cost of freedom. For the past 25 years, I've traveled across North America as a filmmaker and historian, interviewing veterans, men and women who stood in places most of us only read about in books. I've listened to soldiers and Marines who stormed beaches under enemy fire, pilots who watched friends disappear from the skies, combat medics who carried wounded soldiers through chaos and smoke, sailors who never forgot the sounds of battle or a lone burial at sea, and young Americans barely out of high school who were asked to carry burdens far beyond their years. Over time, these interviews became more than just documentaries. They became one of the largest oral histories ever assembled of Americans at war. And after thousands of conversations, one truth arises above all others: freedom is never free. Every liberty we enjoy today, every vote cast, every church bell that rings, every child who sleeps safely at night, every dream pursued in peace was purchased at a price paid by generations of Americans who answered their country's call. Some came home carrying wounds the world could not see, and some never came home at all. Those are the heroes we honor today, not because they sought glory, but because they accepted full duty. Many of the veterans I've interviewed rarely spoke about themselves as heroes. In fact, they would quietly say, "I was just doing my job," or "I was no different than others." But history tells us otherwise, because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite fear. It is the young soldier climbing from a landing craft into enemy fire, the medic refusing to leave the wounded behind, the pilot finishing the mission knowing the odds, the military family waiting at home through months of uncertainty and prayer. As Americans, we inherit the freedom secured by these sacrifices, but we also inherit a responsibility to remember, to teach the next generation, to preserve the stories before they disappear, to never allow the sacrifices of our fallen to become distant footnotes in history. That responsibility has guided much of my life's work and ultimately led me to writing my recent book, Capturing Courage on Camera, a reflection on the extraordinary privilege of documenting the voices of our veterans before time silences them forever. Because when a veteran passes, a library burns. A first-hand chapter of American history is gone forever. And I can tell you this: the greatest generation, the Korean War generation, the Vietnam veterans, the men and women of the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan, they do not ask us for perfection, but they do ask us not to forget. So today, let us remember the empty chairs at family tables, the folded flags handed to grieving families, the rows of white headstones stretching across fields of honor, the names etched into memorial walls, the quiet acts of sacrifice history books may never fully record. And let us remember that the freedoms we often take for granted were defended by ordinary Americans who did extraordinary things when their nation needed them most. Uncommon valor was a common virtue among our nation's finest. Memorial Day reminds us that patriotism is not measured only in words, but in remembrance, in gratitude, and in how we choose to live in the freedom others died to preserve. May we be worthy of their sacrifice. May we carry their stories forward. And may God forever bless the men and women who gave what Abraham Lincoln called the last full measure of devotion for the United States of America. Thank you, and may God continue to bless America.